Here's what happens after she lays eggs.
The first thing I do is gently remove the mother, being extra careful that I don't damage the eggs.
She had these eggs wrapped up in a strange way, so it took me a moment to untangle her. Once I remove her, I mark the tops of all of the eggs with an X. This is an important step because if the eggs roll, you need to be able to find which way is up. Because if the embryo is upside down, it can't damage or kill it, causing the egg to go bad. Whoops! And this is exactly why I marked them. After the eggs are marked, I put them in my egg box and I candle them.
I'm primarily looking for veins inside the eggs and to ensure that the embryo is near the top.
And from what I'm seeing right now, all these eggs look really good. Next, I'll use some plastic wrap to lock the humidity inside of the egg box and get them off to the incubator. Once the eggs are safe in the incubator, I'll take care of the mother. While snakes are gravid, also known as pregnant, they often go off food. She hasn't taken a single meal in over 3 months. So I'm going to give her a nice warm soak to help her rehydrate and wash the smell of the eggs off of her. I find that removing the smell of the eggs from her and the enclosure often gets her eating again sooner. She weighed about 1,600 grams before I started breeding her, and now she's down to about 1,100 grams.
So now my priorities are to get her back up to a healthy weight and successfully hatch the eggs.
This ball python egg is starting to go bad. The egg has developed some wet spots and some green mold.
And in my experiences, when you see a dark green or black mold forming, it often means that the embryo has already died.
These eggs have only been incubating for about 3 days, so I honestly don't see this egg making it another 50 to 55 days. But I don't give up easy, and I'm gonna do all I can to try to save the egg. Only the one egg has developed mold, but the other eggs look a little off to me, so I'm gonna treat them for mold as well. I'll continue to incubate them normally, but I'm going to add some antifungal powder to all of them. This will help dry up the wet spots and slow down or stop the growth of any more mold. I like to sprinkle the powder on, rub it in, and then sprinkle on some more, paying extra attention to where the mold is growing. This technique works really well when it's a white or light green mold growing on the outside of the egg. But when it's a dark green or black mold forming on the inside of the eggshell coming out, that egg's probably not going to make it.
Now, if we were on day 50, I would consider cutting open the egg to try to save the baby snake.
But this early on in incubation, there's really not much we could do. These ball python eggs have been incubating for about 6 days.
And 3 days ago, one of those eggs started developing mold.
I attempted to treat the egg with some antifungal powder, but it didn't work out. The mold continued to spread and it started turning some funky colors. I decided to candle the egg one more time before removing it. You could see that the egg is not lighting up as much as it normally would. That's because all of the yolk inside is solidifying, which often happens when the egg goes bad. So the light doesn't pass through the solidified yolk. I can't see the presence of veins, so I know something was living and growing inside, but it definitely died. I'm always fascinated with the development of the snake inside of the egg, so I'm going to cut this open and see what's inside. At first I was unsure if the rest of the clutch was going to go bad as well, so I decided to candle those eggs one more time. And it appears that all of these eggs have strong veins and it looks like everything is developing normally.
So for right now, it looks like the rest of the clutch is going to make it.
These ball python eggs are on day 29 of incubation.
Unfortunately, we did have one egg go bad.
The pairing for this clutch was an albino pied female to a pastel pied male. This is her first year laying eggs for me, and she laid 5 good looking eggs. However, 3 days into incubation, one of those eggs started to develop some mold and then went completely bad. And I did cut it open. If you want to watch it, the video is up on my YouTube channel. Despite that egg going bad, the rest of the clutch is looking pretty good.
We're still about 25 to 30 days away from these eggs hatching, and a lot of things could happen between now and then.
So I'm going to candle the eggs to see if everything is developing properly. What I'm primarily looking for is the presence of veins on the top of the egg and a thicker looking mass sitting on the bottom of the egg, which is actually the developing snake mixed in with some yolk. I'm also going to check for any mold developing on the bottom of the eggs, and I don't see any. The eggs are also nice and plump, which means they have enough humidity.
I don't want to keep these eggs out any longer, so I'm going to get them back in the incubator and we'll check up on them again soon.
These ball python eggs are on day 50 of incubation, so they should be hatching within the next week.
If you recall, one of the eggs in this clutch went bad.
We attempted to save the egg with some antifungal powder, but our efforts were futile. And we did cut the bad egg open. The video is on our YouTube channel. And this beauty right here is the mother of this clutch. She's made up of 2 recessive genes, albino and pied. So this clutch is going to have some really beautiful snakes in it because the father is a pastel pied, which means we will see some pieds and pastel pieds, but we won't see any albinos because the father doesn't carry any copies of the albino gene.
And you need 2 copies of the albino gene to create a visual albino. So all of the babies will be visual pieds, and they'll carry one copy of the albino gene. So if they were to breed with an albino in the future, they could create visual albino. Despite that one egg going bad, the rest of these eggs are looking really good. They're now significantly denting in, and the shell is getting really thin, which means more baby snakes are just a few days away. These ball python eggs are on day 53 of incubation, and they're already starting to hatch. They're a few days early, and that's likely because it's been really hot here. 2 of the 4 snakes have already pipped. Let's get a closer look at this one. Because both of the parents were pied, all of the offspring should be pied as well. In addition to distorting the pattern, the pied gene will also give the snake blotches of white throughout the entire snake's body, creating a very unique and beautiful looking snake. At first glance, this one looks like it's going to be a pastel pied, just like the father. And because the mother was an albino, all of these snakes will carry one copy of the albino gene. So they won't be visual albinos, but they have the potential to create albinos in the future. I'm going to get these little ones back in the incubator, and I'll update you tomorrow. These ball python eggs are on day 54 of incubation. And they all pipped. Let's cut this egg open a little bit wider and get a closer look. At this point, the snakes are fully developed and they already pipped, so cutting the egg won't cause any issues at all. I have to be very careful and focused when cutting so I don't harm the snake. And after a few snips, I could open the egg up a little wider and get a better look. And it looks like another healthy and beautiful pied. I prefer not to remove the snakes after they pip. A day or so after pipping, the snakes will usually crawl out of the egg on their own. One of the fascinating things about snakes is that they're born precocial, which means they are born with the instincts and abilities to hunt and survive all on their own. So they don't need parents to teach them anything. But the snakes won't be eating anytime soon. These snakes have a slow metabolism, and their bellies are filled with yolk. So that'll keep them full for a while, and they won't even be interested in food for about 2 to 3 weeks. These ball pythons are on day 55 of incubation, and it took a few days, but they finally all crawled out of their egg. Visually, this has to be one of my favorite clutches of the season so far. This is the pied clutch, and as predicted, every one of the snakes turned out to be pied. The pied gene is what gives them those large blotches of white and the distorted pattern. Now these snakes did hatch a few days earlier than expected. Usually my ball pythons will start hatching between day 55 and day 60, but it's been really hot here, and the higher the heat, the faster the eggs will hatch. But it looks like they made it in good health. Thankfully, I don't see any deformities or any other health issues. So now I'm rinsing the snake off to get any egg box substrate and any dried up yolk off of them. And now that they're fresh and clean, I'll put them back in a tub with a damp paper towel. They'll stay in here for about 5 to 7 days until they have their first shed. After that first shed, their colors really brighten up and they look amazing. So I can't wait to see this clutch in their fresh skin. I'm going to get these guys back in the incubator and we'll check up on them again soon. 5 days ago, these ball pythons crawled out of their egg. And now they're getting ready to shed. You can tell when a snake is getting ready to shed just by looking at it. The first thing that you'll notice is the snake's eyes get cloudy. They turn a bluish gray color. You'll also notice that the snake's colors aren't as bright as they usually are. And finally, you'll notice that the snake's belly has a little bit of a pinkish color to it. So what's happening is these snakes outgrew their skin, and now they need to get rid of it. So the snake releases a lymph fluid that separates the old skin from the new skin. And that fluid is what causes the snake's eyes to become cloudy and the dulling of its color. It also allows the snake to easily crawl out of that old layer of skin. During this time, humidity and hydration are critical for the snake to have a good shed. So what I'm going to do now is give the snakes a new damp paper towel. This will ensure the humidity remains nice and high. And at this age, they likely won't use it, but I'm also going to include a small bowl of water. And in another day or so, we'll almost certainly see 4 perfect sheds. This ball python clutch just had their first shed and they look stunning. This morph is called a piebald, also known as a pied. The pied gene gives them large white blotches throughout their body. This little one has the most white out of the entire clutch. When pieds have a lot of white, they're known as high whites. And logically, when they don't have a lot of white, they're known as low whites. The pied gene is a recessive gene, which means in order to make them, each parent has to have and pass on a copy of the pied gene. Now these guys are even a little bit more special because they each carry a copy of the albino gene, which is another recessive gene. So if in the future they were paired with another snake that carries the albino gene, they could create albinos. I love how this little one's color pattern changes towards the end of its body. So because they carry one copy of the albino gene, they're known as heterozygous, or het for albino. And this last little one is one of my favorite out of the clutch. I'm always drawn to high white albinos, but I like the paradoxing on this one, which is a marking that's inconsistent with the rest of the snake's pattern. Now that they're all shed out, I'll separate them into their own enclosures.